this is where we would loop in the Reunited, because you've been on a European tour, and you and I are back potting again, if that's a verb, since the summit, right?
Yeah, we haven't done no, we did one pod, but yeah, I just came back late last night. I missed catching up with you. I know we had just a couple of minutes to talk briefly, but it's good to be back and good to be sharing this space with you because some interesting things I've learned in the last couple months, and I know you've learned the same.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing that everybody I know that's even peripherally associated with dentistry is now starting a DSO, their own DSO, which is kind of crazy to me.
Dentists, non-dentists, consultants, there's a bunch of, I would agree. I'm seeing a lot of emerging DSO formation activity, right? For people who either don't have the chops to do it, nor do they have a practice kind of thing as a platform. They're just kind of standing on the sidelines, right? Saying that they have influence potentially, Craig, and they're using that influence to then aggregate. And so
that's a really good, I just want to kind of double click on what you just said. If people have influence, but no expertise, that for them is enough to say, I should start my own DSO, which kind of bothers me. I know it bothers you too, because there's a lot of nuances to running a dental practice. But I think if we can be transparent, Pete, one of the reasons why we haven't completed such a task is because we're perfectionistic. We're trying to make the most perfect thing ever. So what do they say? Perfection is the enemy of productivity.
Execution is the enemy of execution. Yeah. I mean, you and I went back and talked about it in 2017. It's like, how do you create a mechanism where everyone wins? Because in so many of these private equity consolidation roll-ups, it's things get worse, right? Meaning the team gets treated worse, the dentist gets treated as an employee and not a quote unquote partner, even though they say, oh, we're affiliated with. Things get worse because they have shareholders to answer to now, right? They have investors that have to be answered to this investment. And so I think that's been where we keep going up and bumping our heads and saying, hey, how do we create something? How do we create something? And we hit these walls. The interesting thing though, Greg, about when someone wants to start a DSO, they usually have to start with something that's called a platform. And so either they have to go, and so if it's a private equity and they're like, hey, I want to get into dentistry. I heard it's nice in here, right? In this pool, they usually have to first start with the platform. And a platform is something that has enough size and scale where it makes sense to invest the things they're going to, right? So it may be a practice with like yours, Craig, that has, one location, but huge operational sides.
Yeah, but more typically like yours though.
Where there's distribution, right? Where it's let's say 5 to 8 locations, and they're saying, hey, you've got enough distribution in quote unquote Georgia to be a good platform, right? We've got distributional size, we've got locations. You've already kind of done the heavy lift. We just need to start working on the centralization of stuff. And I don't know if this is a good place to interject something, Craig. So you remember Shreyas from the summit. So Shreyas is my AI friend. He's doing some things with I will bring him on later, but Shreyas is a tech genius AI. And so in crypto, we talk about things as centralized, like a central bank is not the cool thing to do, right? Central bank is not good. But in dentistry, we have this nomenclature that moves towards centralization. So what I think is really cool about the future of dentistry is technology is going to level the playing field very much so for the solo practitioner, right? I think that and where I'm going with that is that, Craig, you and I use this should be the title of the pod, is that we feel that solo practitioners are bringing a knife to a quote unquote gunfight. And not that there's a gunfight, but it's a good metaphor, right?
Yeah, it's you're not playing on a level playing field.
We'll unpack that for us. So we have some anecdotal evidence and stuff like that, but unpack like what that means.
Okay, so what Peter and I were at a recent, you and I were at a recent meeting with some OGs of the DSO world, and
that's kind of an understatement, but yeah,
they're big dogs. But one of the things is that they're significantly older than us, Peter. So they got us by like 20, 30 years in age, and the level of conversation that we had with them about the use of their tech the fact that they use AI for their calls, and the fact that they then on calls that were not completed, meaning people that didn't get to complete an appointment or didn't get to make an appointment, they go back in and they reach back out to those people and say, hey, we missed you when you called the office.
So let's double click on this for a second. Okay, so because I want to keep expanding on all the things you're talking about. So because I want to be crystal clear on the gun, if we're using the metaphor, right?
What is the gun
in this?
So now we're talking about
this
AI.
practice. This group has basically a center of 20 people. They are not
call 40. I thought it was 40.
No, they had 20 individuals that they would basically use Patient Prism from their technology standpoint to identify calls and look for things in, as the AI call recorder and synopsis. If the patient did not convert on that call, this quote unquote assassin team would then pick up the phone and say, hey, we made a mistake on that last call. We'd like to get you scheduled here. They misspoke here, or we have a deal here.
Yeah,
or
we actually do fillings.
Yeah, we do that.
Practice.
So they have an inbound lead team, and then they have an assassin team that goes back and doesn't even answer the phones. They're just looking for the opportunities of unscheduled calls.
Yep.
Okay, so that's just that when you hear something like that, you're like, holy shit, like, all right, that's a ammunition that I can't necessarily bring to a gunfight.
Right. And then the next gun, which is we have to talk about, is procurement. So clear, when you and I, and we're big dogs in clear aligners, but our Invisalign bill, even at, I'm at Diamond Plus.
But that's a
now.
Lab. Let's put that in a lab bill. So stay with procurement for a second.
Okay,
procurement of supplies.
Procurement. So we're talking to DSOs that have procurement clinical supplies at like 2.6 and 3.2%.
Yeah.
I'm so psyched.
That was the blended average across these multitude of practices. Platform. Yeah.
Next thing, labs, clear aligners, Invisalign, better than we could ever compete in such low lab fees. I mean, even at the Diamond Plus or whatever the new plutonium level is that they just came out with, I have no idea, enriched uranium level, we still can't compete at that price point. And then the third thing on top of that kind of juices the whole return is payer relationships. Mm-hmm. So I don't know of any profession, any industry, I should say, I'm sorry, where look, let me just back up. Starbucks latte has to compete at some level with the McCafe or Dunkin' latte. They can't just charge whatever they want. But the DSOs have an ability to affect payer relationships because of the amount of lives covered. So they can actually sell the clear aligner orthodontic treatment for more and pay less for it. So when you work both
same
sides,
with crown reimbursements and things like that.
Right, crown reimbursements. But that's the same in medicine as well. Cleveland Clinic gets paid higher for their appendectomies than like some local, Joe Blow hospital because they have better outcomes, and the insurance and payer relationships are altered by that.
So let's pause for a second. So the four big variables, I want to make sure you agree with this. The four big variables as you look at your dental P&L are your supplies, your lab bills, your employee costs, and your marketing. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. So of that, the rest of them, are fixed expenses. Rent, you pay, and utilities and insurances. Those are just your fixed expenses. So
where your variable expenses are what typically will eat you alive and erode your profitability.
Yeah, and it's typically where you can enact change and execution to become competitive or more competitive. So where I think the takeaway there is, when you're looking at your P&L, don't get drowned, don't get distracted by the things that you can't change, right? Look for the things that you can change. You can increase your productivity, right, which will increase collections, and then you can lower your expenditures on some of those P&L line items. That's essentially what it is. Okay. So
let's talk about the gun. I don't want to hijack where you're going with it.
Yeah.
But can we at least talk about the gun with the team salaries? Because team salaries of the four things you just mentioned are typically the largest thing. So it should be, if you're doing it right, 25%, 26% all in. But when we uncover people's P&Ls, we see 35 and 38%. So let's talk about the operational efficiencies of the DSO, that what they have in their team expenditures.
Yeah. So, at the local level, it's still doctor, assistant, hygienist, right? Like those are all
Right.
providers.
Right.
Where there's economies of scale and that was the whole thing of centralization, where you have, people
3
answering
admin people
phones,
per office. When you have
admin.
15 offices, you don't need 3 admin in every office.
Correct. So you try to share those across the resource, so you don't have a redundancy at every single location. You have what's called the economies of scale, and I know people know this, but when you start setting it up with, that's why even people we know, Craig, are going towards, like Dwight, I believe he has his own kind of call center set up, right? I think he has a centralized
whole
office,
back end support system.
Yeah.
But then the next gun for team is benefits. Look at the procurement, your health benefits. Like, when you go as an individual to try to buy health insurance, it's drastically different than when you're buying for 1,000 people. Or
so
401k
here's
benefits.
where I summarize the guns and what I feel like where a DSO might have an advantage over solo practice. And then I'm going to talk about too, where I feel like there's advantages where the private practice has advantages that a DSO is never going to be able to have an advantage on. Okay. So advantage number one for a DSO, the labs. You just spoke about that, right? When you have that much volume, you exert power. Either it's Invisalign or you have your own lab, or you can just go to a big national lab and say, hey, we'll bring you our book of business. What can you do? And it's typically 50% of what just anyone off the streets would pay, kind of thing. I mean, it's high, it's significantly lower. Number two, like you said, is insurance negotiation. There's a lot more power in the reimbursements of the DSO. Number three, the procurement of supplies, right? Like you just alluded to, a 2.5% to 3% of a line item in supplies is crazy versus like some of the best solo practices I've ever seen are in the 4.5%, 5%, right? And these things seem insignificant, right? You're saying, oh, it's only 2%, but 2%, as you look from an enterprise value, is giant, right? Because that if that was saved, that would be EBITDA and goodwill cash flow. And so that is, you can put your multiple number on that. And that's actually what the savings is. It isn't the year-to-year cash flow. It's extrapolated over the enterprise value. Number four, they have better technology as a whole. And I don't mean clinical technology, right? We all have scanners and CBCTs. Those are becoming kind of normal in the dental practice. AI is becoming in there, and we had Pearl come and speak at Summit, so we're hearing more and more practices. But when I say they have better technology, it's things like the call center, right? The call diagnostics, the patient prism. They're putting AI in everything they can do right now. Number five is just better data, and then execution on said data. And so I think those are the big five things where I see that a DSO really has the big gun. Okay. So if you're a solo practitioner and you're listening to this and you're saying, well, God, I'm screwed, or this isn't fair. And, that I think that there's things that you can do. I think having the context of just knowing that those are the things you probably need to focus on to level the playing field is knowledge is power. But number two, here's where I feel like solo practices can win, or solo or private practices can win. The patient experience, as we know, is the great equalizer. The reviews, a lot of times these big chains, let's just take, for example, a national chain that we see that's probably not very good. We see them at every standalone business in our community, right? They're not creating this raving experience for people, right? Enough where they go home and they say, hey, refer your friend and your family, right? They're not creating a patient experience that is congruent what we talk about at Bulletproof to be just something that they won't forget, like changing the face of dentistry.
Can I pause you just for 1 second on that?
Sure.
I agree with you. They're not creating the patient experience that you and I seek to provide. However, I think they're better than the average person out there. Maybe not the person listening to this podcast because they're anxious to learn and they're engaged. We have a different segment of dentistry, but the average person that's out there, they're actually could be better. And I think when we look at from 30,000 feet down, DSOs get a really bad rap. There's a lot of doctors that I talk to that are like, I don't want to work at one and blah, blah, blah. I don't think that I actually think the DSO, the average DSO, even the big box
So you're saying
DSO,
the average DSO has a better experience than the average dental practice?
I believe that to be so. Yes. From the way it looks, they're updated. Let's just talk about the one. I know who you're talking about. We're not going to it'll remain nameless. Usually an out parcel shopping center right by a Starbucks.
Or
and there's
Walmart.
A variety of them, by the way.
Right.
There's 2 or 3 I'm thinking of as we're talking. They have scanners. They have a Keurig coffee machine. They have clean looking environments. Their sterilization techniques are public and they're very visible. And I just think I visited a dental practice 3 weeks ago that a buddy of mine wanted to take a look at. It was so old school, doing amalgam, old furniture. I was like, I don't care how good the doctor is. I felt unsafe there. I would feel as a patient unsafe because things were so old. So I just think, I'm not trying to hijack it.
You're not hijacking. I mean, that's tough to hear, quite honestly.
It is tough to hear.
Because I'm trying to put that into the bucket of the advantage. And you're saying, no. I feel like that goes into the other column of the guns.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I also don't think the person that's listening to this podcast is the average dentist. This is an entrepreneurial dentist. Most dentists out there will not listen to this. They say, I do great shots and I can do really good dentistry and I don't need to learn about business. I don't have a business. I'm a dentist. I think by virtue of what we say, we're selecting a different portion of the audience.
All right. I think let me then complete my second thing, which I feel like was the advantage. And you may even say not so much, but a retentive culture, meaning that a lot of big organizations, you see a lot of turnover, doctors in and out, not the same doctor, not the same team, not the same family. I'm sorry, not the same faces of the team when people come in, because there's higher turnover. And
that's the Achilles heel of the DSO, doctor retention.
Yes, doctor retention or doctor recruitment or team recruitment. So when you have a good culture, right, and you expand on that and you're proud about it in your social media and on your website and on your, and in the patient experience, and you really are looking out for your team and trying to create authentic stuff, then I feel like that is an advantage. But Craig, honestly, as you're sitting here, I'm still flustered by you saying that the patient experience thing, because I really wanted to try and be this. I didn't want to just be that, hey, you know what? We're all bringing a knife to a gunfight kind of thing, right? That seems doom and gloom a little bit. I'll tell you the silver lining I see.
Okay. Here's a silver lining I see, because I do think the DSOs that you and I speak of from 10, 15 years ago are not the DSOs of today. And I think they have a little bit of a negative halo effect, and not a halo effect, but what am I trying to say? A little bit of their net promoter score. I don't know what better word to use, but the perception in the perception in our profession is that I shouldn't work for a DSO. It's selling out. It's working for corporate. I don't know what the connotation of working for a DSO is, but I actually would tell the people that are listening to this that are in school or recently graduated, it is a great place to learn. And of the things that I've heard friends go through as associates and how they weren't paid and things weren't done properly, or that they were wiping off the hand pieces and not sterilizing it or not paying people properly. DSOs can't get away with that. They're too big to do things, to mouse around mess around like that. My only thought, and the reason why there is an opportunity in this conversation of the knife and gunfight, is that the DSOs were fueled largely over the last 5 to 7 years on zero interest rate policy. And I see
from an acquisition standpoint.
Yep. So basically free money. You have a doctor. I don't care what it looks like. We're going to gobble you up, paying a godly amount of money for you. And I think there's a day of reckoning coming for a lot of these DSOs. I think there's a lot of people that were sold, hey, we'll buy your practice at X dollars, but don't worry, in 3 years, you're going to triple your money. And I don't necessarily see that happening. The investors, the PE, a lot of the PE had short-term interest or short-term focus on turning these DSOs from something and making them to something better in 36 to 60 months. And I think with the rates being where they're at, there's going to be a fallout. There's going to be a lot of practices that come
because
back
of
into the
their
market.
cost of capital, right?
Yep.
Right. The cost of the capital was caught on a variable when they bought. And so it's not these fixed rates like a mortgage thing. It's a rolling kind of number based on prime. And so when you're saying we have a high interest rate environment, you actually have to have you have to have same store sales growth. You actually have to be growing it. You can't just make money based on the arbitrage of buying for 4x and immediately it being worth 8x in your ecosystem.
Yeah, that doesn't work anymore.
It doesn't work anymore.
So I don't think anybody really cared about same store sales growth. You could be operationally silly and inefficient. You could actually take a practice that was doing $1 million, buy it for 5 times and have it be worth by accumulating at 9. Even if it dropped by 20%, same store sales, like 20% of your patients disappeared or the doctor left, you could still make money. That's just not the same situation right now. And I think the reason why we have an advantage is the investor puts a very difficult, constrained timeline on a DSO to perform. When you and I make decisions about our practices, or any other private owner that's on that's listening to this podcast right now, you're not just thinking about what's going to happen over the next 2 years. You're making long-term decisions.
Correct.
You're making what's going to be the right move for me over the next 5-7 years. That's the problem. That's the one major problem, I think, with the DSO, investor-backed DSO model, especially PE-backed DSO model, is that the PE needs to get a return. And they're willing to do things that are possibly not in the best interest of the practice over a 5 to 7 year period to make the earnings look good. So time is on our side, even for those that are 55 and 65. You just have a different level of pressure on you.
So let's talk about this for a second, about kind of like, okay, you guys have laid out that it's a little bit doom and gloom, quite honestly, Craig. And let's say someone who's listening to this saying like, I don't want to join this. I got lots of years left in my practice. I think you have a couple options. Meaning, let's take, for example, the avatar of someone who's a 35-year-old entrepreneurial dentist, and they want to remain solo. They've got a lot of wind left in their sails. They want to grow things, but they also kind of look over and they're seeing that like, shit, we're just not playing the same game in terms of operational efficiency, lab, insurance, procurement, better technology, blah, blah, blah. It's just getting harder to compete. I think a good alternative to that is I would love to see there being more merger activity in dentistry, right? Maybe there's someone in your town who you could say, hey, we're a group of 12 operatories and 3 doctors. And hey, we're a group of 10. Let's look about us holding hands as opposed to us fighting each other and fighting and competing. Let's potentially join hands. And there's a lot of things that can happen. You can start getting small economies of scale from things like that. So it doesn't have to be this draconian move of I'm a solo or I sell. Maybe it's a merger. Right? Not merger acquisition, but maybe it's a straight merger. And I would love to see, look, mergers are done so often. Like my buddies, and you have buddies who are not in dentistry, Craig, and you travel with them and you're in groups with them and you dinners with them. I hear about mergers all the dang time in the car business, in the finance business, in the, I hear about them all the time. I hear about acquisitions in dentistry where someone surrenders control, but I don't hear about mergers much. So anyway,
in the same way, by the way, I think I'm hitting on the same behavior characteristic why people don't want to work together. I don't see partnerships as much. I see, senior doc wanting to hold on to 100% of the practice forever. And the comment when you and I will mention, like, why don't you take on a partner? That person that's been there for 5 years, they're going to leave if you don't let them partner in. We'll hear things like, well, I don't want to give up a piece of my cupcake. Like I worked hard to build this.
Yeah.
So I think we're hitting the same behavior pattern of dentists don't want to share, and what am I going to lose? So that's the problem.
Well, if we stay stuck in that mentality, Craig, I think you're doomed. Is where I'm going.
For sure.
I think you're doomed. I think that this doesn't get better with time. This isn't a blip on the radar. The pathway of the most aggressive DSOs becomes more disadvantageous to the solo provider, meaning the tech gets better, especially when you pick your head up, the AI is going to get better, procurement, like all these things get more advantage goes to them. Would you agree?
I agree.
Right.
100%.
There's no, oh, this is just a time period and the field will balance again. No. So, so I just think, look, if and I am a solo practitioner, I should say, so a solo owner of a group, but like, this is why I'm
privately held group is what you are.
Yeah. Okay. Fair.
We're both now privately held groups,
but I would be, and I am incredibly focused on trying to level that playing field, right? Constantly looking at my procurement, constantly looking at my marketing expenses, constantly looking at ways I can navigate. I built a lab, a big commercial lab that only serves us. Well, we built a lab that only serves us so that we could kind of like level the playing field there, because our lab expenses were 12 and 13.
Your quality went up too.
Yeah. So now we have 2 full-time ceramists on stuff, as well as a digital, there's a lot of 3D printing and such going on. Don't make me talk that technical stuff, but that was the impetus for starting that, because I was like, we are going to get murdered here if we keep paying 12 and 13% expenditures from a P&L. Right. So, look, you and I have had conversations, and we are kind of deep in figuring out how you and I can combine our forces. From right now, we are 2 disparate entities, right? Spodak Dental, Atlanta Dental Spa, and you and I are looking at ways in which we can, merge our enterprises together for the same economies of scale. So even at this size, there's an existential threat. Is where I'm going, Craig.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I do, you talked about this avatar of this dentist that's entrepreneurial, 35 years old, fire in his belly, her belly, wants to grow. There's no choices for that dentist right now. So if you're the dentist that's 55, 60 years old, like, I'm getting my ass kicked, I want to hang up my handpiece, I can't handle this anymore. There's like 5,000 choices for you. So in full disclosure, Peter and I have been trying to solve this riddle since probably 2017, trying to figure out how can we have everyone win. And if the dentist can win, and there's a long-term strategy, not a short-term strategy, but a long-term strategy where the doctor can rise with pari passu with the organization, that fixes everything. And I think the DSOs are getting smarter, by the way. The JV model, as they call it, where the doctor can participate in the organic upside growth of their location. That's a wonderful model, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to figure out when's the peak time for you to sell, it's like your peak. You never know when you're peaking. You don't know when you're peaking till a year after, Craig, you're off.
Most people can't get over with, though, Bud, is at the end of the day, this model, this roll-up model, does not work unless the private equity or the acquiring group does not acquire 51%, which means there's control over the entity. And that's why most dentists got into this profession, was from an autonomy, from I'm not going to be told what to do, so to speak. And
well, there's fear. Of
course, like, what are you going to do to my team? What are you going to do to my payroll? What are you going to do to my dentistry? You make me use this lab. And so
it's largely unfounded, though, Pete. I was talking to my buddy Norm this morning, and he said that doctors, lawyers, and one other, I can't remember what he said right now, they're the worst. They get the worst outcomes in the financial services industry of any other profession. Those three, because they're smart and they think they can do it themselves.
Yeah,
so
I could see that.
So it's like, well, we're products of it.
I can see myself doing that. But like, I got this. I'll just learn. I'll just watch some YouTube.
I think that's the reason why they're not willing to partner as much. I think business people come together, and to your point, when you said the car dealers and stuff like that, they want to go through, they want to analyze their numbers. They see themselves as business people. I think dentists see themselves as dentists first. So it's like, I cannot talk to Peter. Peter doesn't use XYZ composite,
right?
Or Peter doesn't believe in centric. He believes in CR or whatever, centric relation versus CR. I mean, I'm getting over my head. Centric relation.
No, you're making a great point. You're making an exceptional point. Is that for we think in this merger world that there has to be this Goldilocks perfect blend of like us coming together. We have the same culture, same material, same composite.
This DSO that wants to acquire you. Everything's perfect.
Yes.
Oh wait, I can't use Jones's wax for my wax up. No, this goes. I can't practice like that. Like I went to go talk to this doctor about acquiring his practice. Like I cannot work with anybody, you know, he's using amalgam. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in that. Like I don't believe in zirconia. I'm like, holy shit, like this would be incredibly difficult to try to work with this person. And then you take in the average DSO, they're dealing with this like times 1,000. So, you know, I think that business people recognize that they exist to provide value to the customer and also generate a profit. I think dentistry, when you look holistically, the average dentist thinks it exists to just do it their way. And that works well for the profession and for the patient potentially, but it makes it very ripe for consolidation. Because I think the average DSO is starting to do it better than the average dentist in every single platform. When I left that conversation that you and I had
3.5 hour dinner,
3.5 hour dinner, I was like, holy shit. It's like, this is, you and I talked the whole way home about it. We're like, this is crazy.
That's where we said the line, dude, this is a knife to a gunfight, and we got to talk about this and not, you know, and if it, like I said, if it only creates the action of the awareness of, you know, start getting lean and mean in areas you can, right? Start looking for potential practices that you can hold hands with and merge potentially.
And also don't talk shit about the DSO. If you're thinking they're, you know, a bunch of idiots and they're not going to, you know, take market share away from you, that's just not true. It's really not true anymore. There's a lot of DSOs. We talked about on the podcast 6 years ago, DSO 3.0, 4.0, they're getting much better and they're learning, and they're smart people, and there's big money. You know, BlackRock and Saudi, Mubadala, you know, which is the UAE Sovereign Wealth Fund. I mean, these are money will figure this stuff out. And there's a lot of money moving into our industry.
You know, so and I feel like too, with the amount of student debt, and I don't know if it's just coincidence that student debt is so high, which is limiting a lot of options for private practice ownership or buy-ins of, you know, partnerships, right? So, but if you're straddled with so much student debt, let's call it 500,000.
Let's call it 800. That's okay. What the USC is predicting
not be
after.
So doom and glooming.
But, okay, sorry. So call it 500 grand.
No, you're right. I mean, look, I think it's wise. You gave me that statistic, and I put it out on Twitter that it was the University of Southern California, that if the first year dental grads will anticipate
2028 dental grad anticipated student loan debt $799,000.
So $800,000.
And then when Paul Goodman on Dental Nachos put on a post, do you think it's worth it to take out $800,000 loan to become a dentist? Like 97% or 98% said no. So, I mean, things have got to change. But I think that I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but I don't think it's wise to disparage and just say the DSO is a bunch of jackasses and they won't affect me and I can stay, you know, completely in my silo.
Yeah, so there's some good actors and some bad actors is what you're kind of saying. And don't lump them all in the same group, because eventually, let's just say, like you said, like we started this pod, there are people that we know who have influence in dentistry that are starting something. Maybe those are going to be fantastic. Maybe they have optics that we don't know about, right? If they're going to be the tip of the spear. And maybe they're solving for the things that we just talked about, Craig. I doubt it. But you never know. You never know. But so you're saying is basically just look, keep options open, right? Maybe there will be a Goldilocks scenario for you, but in the meantime, be trying to operate from a position of strength, not weakness, right? You can't go and have these completely different looking P&Ls than a DSO, because it's not fair. It's not fair.
And also too, when you're swimming alone, you don't swim as fast as someone swimming up behind you. And I think it's just good to be aware that there are competitive forces, and it's fine. It's not going to bankrupt you. I'm not trying to say it's gonna sink you, but it will make you better. Be thankful for the competition you had. Be thankful for the person in your community that's on your heels. It just makes you better. Because the customer is constantly, our patient in this particular example is looking for innovation. Mm-hmm. And if you don't feel any existential threat on your heels, you are not going to innovate. It's not good for your patient. So if you're the one saying, I don't need a scanner, I don't need this, I don't need that, my patients don't mind goopy impressions, my patients don't mind this, they don't mind that, someone's going to come along and provide something different. I like that. I love this idea. I mean, it's scary, but it's also just good for you and good for your patients to constantly be innovating. And what the big takeaway from that 3.5 hour dinner was one of the largest DSOs out there that probably has the highest level of implementation difficulty, meaning so many practices to implement, innovative systems through. They're doing it at a pace that blew me away. So if they can do it at, 500,000, 1,500 practices, what's stopping you?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
And by the way, you mentioned Patient Prism. We do have a deal with them. I know I love them. I know I love them all.
Yeah,
but we have a
greatest.
microsite, BP.
No. Well, you can go from the web page. I think you just go to the sponsors, but it links you to that deal. So we have
we have bppatientprism.com.
Oh,
bppatientprism.com.
There you go. But it does give a sweet deal. Thanks, Amal.
Yeah. And you and I are both paying members, paying users of it, but it's awesome just to use. I just remember when I used to get these call recordings. I'm like, there's no freaking way I'm going through 90 hours or 100 hours of call recordings.
Dude, you bring up such a funny point. Like, as I bring up marketing and I would probably attribute a lot of where I am today based on knowing marketing, right? Greg, I learned it, the school of it. I got my PhD in it because I had copious amounts of time in my beginning. And I've just been an avid learner of marketing from the past 25 years.
Yep.
And there used to be these things that these marketing companies would say. It's like, hey, when you're doing your marketing, get these 14 calls so that when you put it up, it works on this ad and it works on this ad, and put this up in your, this Google ad and post. And I just could never do it. And on top of that, now you need to go back, Peter, need to go back and listen to all the phone calls that happened because they've been recorded for you. And I was thinking to myself, you want me to go and listen to phone calls or have someone on my team listen to these recorded phone calls and then take action from it? I was like, there's no chance that anyone has the bandwidth to do this.
Yeah, it reminds me of our friend, the Mastermind, that had Ring cameras on all of his call center people. Imagine that, like watching them too.
But I mean, look at where technology, and I think this is just the first inning of stuff, right? I've spoke about when we did that AI pod maybe a couple of months ago. I spoke about call centers are coming, and insurance verification and predeterminations, like all the AI technology is coming to help you be better. It's not coming to take your job.
But I do agree with you too that it levels the playing field on, from the DSO down to us. Their technology that they use can be used by us.
100%.
So that does level.
Well, that's why I did honestly a small breakout at Summit, is because I love it when dentists can pick their head up out of this, out of the operatory and say, hey, is there anything that could maybe, is there any technology that could maybe create some operational advantages for me? And maybe it's early and you be an early adopter, right? And sometimes you don't want to be the early adopter, but like just looking around and saying, hey, here's the bottleneck in my practice. Here's something I need to solve for. Does any technology exist to solve that yet? Right. And that's how I've gotten in trouble, Craig, with trying to launch software myself. And you were an investor in one, and thank you so much. But like, it was, hey, this solution doesn't exist in dentistry. Maybe we just have to go create it. And building software is exceedingly challenging. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, you want to just develop some software, I encourage you not to do it because it is a cash drain.
Unless you're your own development person, maybe that could work.
But more chances than not, right? Because of this renaissance we're living, right? This programming, this technology renaissance we're living in. AI is making things just so fast, right? Code can be developed almost super cheap now by AI co-pilots and things like that. So I don't want to keep going on the AI thing, but combined with learning a ground game like the Bulletproof pathway, and our masterminders learning just the operations of dentistry, as well as things like the Summit, and then technology and operate from a position of power, not just vulnerability like, oh, well, I'm doomed and gloomed. It's like, no, put up a damn fight if that's what you want to do, but it's going to require a fight. It's not just going to be easy. So anyway, any closing remarks, Craig? Anything you want to announce? Anything you want to talk about? We can just spitball. This is the first time I've really talked to you since your vacation.
No, I mean, I'd love to talk to you about all the things going on in my life, but I could do that later. I think I love what you say, and I don't think it's the fight is not. I hear you. I hear the call, the battle cry for to grow and innovate. But that's what you need to do. And I think that we've been very even me, I think I've been a little bit dismissive of what they bring to the table, the DSOs and consolidation. And I actually believe thoroughly now, at the perspective that I have currently, that it's a good thing for dentistry. I actually believe it's a good thing for dentistry. And I think there'll be a lot of hybrid models that come out of it, so that there'll be DSOs that are formed that are powered by older DSOs or platforms, but there's just gonna be a lot of flexibility, like what Uber did for taxi and Airbnb did for staying overnight in people's houses. There's going to be disruption, and it's going to be good, and it's going to help all of us. But for those that are just saying it's not a factor, I'm not going to do anything differently, I just think it's hard. It's very difficult. And a lot of businesses, a lot of dental businesses, and I'm using finger quotes when I say businesses, because they're not really businesses, they're built on iconic dentists. And if you're an iconic dentist and you're just really good with patients, I don't want you to conflate that with being a dental business. So they may be dismissive, like, I am just so good with patients. That's fine. But when you are no longer able to provide care, the business goes away. So I think at a certain point, everybody's got to shift gears. And even if they're iconic at dentistry, they have to shift gears to transition to make it more about themselves, more than just themselves, I should say, and be able to scale a business. I think that's, kind of incumbent upon every business that it should grow. I'd like to
on our next pod talk about some technology things, if we could. You're right, like why I switched from a legacy practice management software to one that's a true enterprise and cloud. I'd like to talk about just some things that are and that was a big change, honestly, Craig. Like, imagine being with a software platform for 20 plus years.
And I know you jumped into another one and switched back after like 2 weeks because you had a mutiny.
Well, that was 8 years. Yeah, 8 years ago. Now and I'm glad we switched back. But this one has proved to be great.
Yeah, this one's crazy.
Yeah,
I know. I agree.
And it's where a lot of DSOs are actually migrating to, right? So you look at skating to where the puck is going, kind of thing, right? From a software, even from a software perspective, like, okay, what are they doing? Oh, they're going to the puck over there. Maybe I should look at that, right? Maybe that will make me.
Yeah, our softwares are totally backwards, man. They don't function. They don't function. I mean, I had Dentrix forever. The accounting system is terrible. The CRM, there's no CRM, a Salesforce type thing to track leads. They're really poorly designed because there's an interface of the clinical and the business, and they've never been able to do both until recently. I wish I had gone to CareStack, in full disclosure. That would have been great. I moved 2 months before you did.
Yeah. Yep. I can expand on that because I think it's more than just, hey, I switch. But I'd like to go into here's why, because I do get hit up a lot. And if you're considering looking at it, then definitely reach out to me because I can connect you with the right people at the company. Just send email to Peter at bulletproofdentalpractice.com. I can hook you up with the good people that they're all good, but it's a good referral when I send in, because I'm actually speaking at their inner circle next year, Craig, on some tech stuff.
That's awesome. Where is the conference?
I don't know where it's going to be. I think it's Orlando. Actually, which is.
Yeah, let me know if you want me to come. I could be your IT
you could sit
support.
in the front row and be like,
"That's my boy. You're my boy."
Speaking of Orlando, we are days away from locking down Summit 2025, and where will it be, Craig?
I don't know. I know it's going to be Orlando, but I saw two different names.
Well, we're negotiating. Well, yeah. So one was a Marriott and one was a Ritz. And so I'm negotiating pretty hard with the Ritz. And here's why I want the Ritz, even though it's actually just a tiny bit more.
I'm getting win flashbacks, Peter.
No. Well, look, you learn from your mistakes. And if you repeat that, then that's shame on you, kind of thing.
Well, no, listen, it wasn't a mistake for our attendees. It was a mistake to buy $28,000 worth of water bottles from the Win.
Well, right. That's what I'm
wins.
saying. So you look, mistakes are just accelerated learning. That's all I tell my children. And the faster you get your butt kicked. And so we got our butt kicked. And so now we've learned. So there's things to look out for. But here's why I'm pushing for here's why I'm pushing for the Ritz. All things being equal, it's actually only $20 more than a regular hotel per night for our attendees, right? So the room nights are a little bit more, but here's why I think it's important. You and I preach all the time on bringing your team, right? And then we also preach about this amazing customer experience. And so a lot of team members haven't had the exposure that maybe you, the doc, have been to, right? With a luxury vacation or this and that, or stayed at a Ritz or a St. Regis or a Waldorf or something like that. So it's like, hey, give them the greatest experience possible. Give our patients the greatest experience when they themselves might not have experienced that. So I'm pushing hard for that because I think that we can, yes, you can bring your team and create alignment and for your goals or your practice and your mission, your vision, but you could also say, hey, check out how they just brought the water there, right? Check out how they said, yes, ma'am. Check, whatever it is.
Check out how they don't point the bathroom. They walk you towards it. But case in point, Peter, I actually did that. I took my entire team to the Ritz back like 8-10 years ago when we hit a certain goal. It was really costly, but I wanted people to experience the Ritz.
And Erica said it was a fantastic exercise. I remember talking to her and she was like, we didn't really know what the outcome would be, but people still talk about that thing, Craig. And that is a fabric of your culture, right? Remember when we went to the Ritz and did that thing? Oh yeah, that's how they did it, right? That is a fabric of your culture that cannot be taken away. So anyway, that's why I'm pushing hard versus like, let's go with a low cost leader. I'm actually pushing hard for this and negotiating pretty hard so that we can make it happen for our attendees as well as our attendees teams of Goten. So
yeah, I love it. I love this thing about, because the Ritz-Carlton has its own leadership center. I don't know if you know that, but there's one like the art of anticipation and meeting the unexpressed needs of the guest. So I have a great Ritz story, which I'll leave you with. When Sage, my daughter, was like 4 years old, we gave her a bottle, a small container of strawberries.
Is this the strawberry story? I love this story.
Yeah, and we walk into the Ritz-Carlton. It was actually at Orlando. It was right around Christmas time. And she took her strawberries and put them in the toilet and flushed it and it backed the toilet up. She had a whole big thing of strawberries and just maybe she wasn't 5. She was probably 2 or 3. I don't even remember, but she wasn't, she was a toddler. So I called down to the reception desk and I said, hey, listen, my 3-year-old daughter flushed her strawberries down the toilet and it clogged our toilet. Can you send somebody up to unclog it? Bring a plunger. And this is no problem. Right away. We'll be right up there. So 5 minutes later or whatever, 2 minutes later, I get a knock on the door and first person that shows up is a man and he has a bowl of strawberries. And I said, what's this for? He's like, well, your daughter's going to need new strawberries because I heard she flushed them down the toilet, but don't worry, right behind me is a guy to unclog your toilet. I didn't ask for strawberries. That was like freaking 10, 12 years ago.
Good. Yeah. And
I can never forget that. I can never forget what happened.
As we're writing, you and I are in the throes of writing a second book called The Patient Experience. And it's mainly for dentistry, but it's also for physicians as well. And that story is in there because I think it's such a simple thing, right? Right. It costs them pretty much nothing. It cost them some strawberries. And you have now, how many people have you told that story to?
Oh, forget
right?
It. That's crazy.
Right?
Couldn't believe they did that.
And so that's the anticipation of things that we can do in dentistry. That is landing the plane on this whole pod. That is now you bring a gun to a gunfight.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. I mean, I was made a Ritz-Carlton fan for life.
Isn't that cool?
And I love what you said. And frankly, I never thought about just the opportunity to take your team to a Ritz and pre-frame them. And we should really write out or do a video for the summit attendees in 2025.
Cool. I know where you're going.
So here's the 5 things you should do. Each of your team members should do this. Notice how they do this. Notice how they do this. Ask directions for the bathroom. I mean, the way that the Ritz-Carlton Leadership Center teaches their people to treat people,
they actually have courses, right? That people lead. Yeah. But instead of courses, like just go and witness it, right? And have your team be, hey, I'm taking you to a nice resort. I really want you guys to take home some things that we can implement, not just what Pete and Craig and the Bulletproof is preaching, but here's some takeaway things that we can do for our
Wouldn't it be cool if we could We should actually, I know we're kind of, this
Spitballing.
podcast has devolved into just you and me speaking now. But on the Ritz-Carlton Leadership Center, they have the employee experience too. So they talk about how service excellence starts from within, and then how
Maybe we could have someone speak from
the
that.
authentic, genuine
That'd be
employees
cool.
engagement drives meaningful customer relationships, which leads to overall organizational success. Maybe we have the employee experience course taught by the Ritz-Carlton Leadership Center
that'd be awesome
for the team.
Okay, so now you're getting me excited. Awesome. So save the date. We don't have it up on the web.
Save any date. Just save all.
No, yeah, save all the dates from now until next October. August. Save it. Save all the dates for Bulletproof. No, but really quick, Craig. We have earmarked the October. I'm sorry, I keep saying October. August 7th through the 10th is potentially where we're pending right now. So
you're cutting my Colorado trip short. Wow.
Well, sacrifices for being the influencer.
Yeah. But also to quick little update, Mastermind is open and will be starting in mid-September. Is that right?
In mid-September. That's right. That's right. Bulletproof. You can go to Bulletproof Mastermind and apply. Not everyone is a good fit, as we've talked about in the past, and we've unfortunately had to say no to a lot of people, but we've said yes to countless as well. So we just want to make sure that we are compatible.
Why do you make me say no to people, by the way?
Well, I don't. You're just Summit. Well. Look, as the dental whisperer,
I was the one who had to say no.
As the dental whisperer, the gift of gab and people is your gift. Yeah. So it's your superpower. So you have to do it. But there's been people who have approached us and saying, if you can guarantee this and guarantee that, I'll sign up. And it's like, ooh, that's not really what we do here.
Well, I mean, yeah, this guy in particular wanted to say if I spent. I think it was like it was like $3,000 a month. Could you guarantee me like $650,000? I'm like, dude, it depends on what you can do.
Exactly. That's my point.
We see masterminders that have been 3 and 4 years and have taken their practices from 1 million to 4 million.
If that's not the greatest data point, right? Like if I was signing up for a mastermind, Craig, personally, I would think like, you know what, we'll do it for a year, right? And what we're seeing, I think that the best data point is that 2 and 3 years, because the first year is just awareness of what you don't know, right? Oh shit, I need to do that. And then you're stuck in this like, holy shit, this entrepreneurial seizure of like all these, you're excited, but it's all these things you want to do, right? And then second year and third year is just execution of it. And it's like I said in the summit, like dentistry is not this crazy complex place where there's secrets that DSOs know or secrets that you know, Craig, that I know. It's not that. It's doing the same simple things, knowing about the same thing and doing them over and over and over and over again with consistent cadence and the customer service that we talked about. But it's not this magic marketing and this magic review formula and this magic practice management and this AI. It's doing some boring stuff. And we have a list, in our Bulletproof pathway. It's the 100 boring things. It's over and over again.
Which screw do I need to turn?
Yeah, that was a great story. That was a great story. That was you know what? Do you want it? I mean, you want to have story time? Since you already told one, you might as well tell the story number 2.
So
Fred Smith.
I'm going to screw it up, but I'll try my best I can. So FedEx moved their facilities to Tennessee, and they put together this massive infrastructure, this massive digitized conveyor belt of every package would go through this one clearinghouse. And it was really efficient, hyper efficient,
Memphis,
working
right?
great.
Is that what you said?
It was in Memphis, yeah. And the one day the conveyor belt stopped working, and they were burning like $50,000 a second or something like that, because the whole operation was completely shut down. And they were freaking out, scrambling, and they found some technician that could actually help get the conveyor belt working again. And the guy comes out, looks around, does his thing, and I guess the story goes that he pulled out a screwdriver and twisted one screw, and everything went back on again, fully running. And he provides them with a bill.
He gives it to Fred Smith. Fred Smith is the CEO or owner at the time, right? And he said, "Here's your bill."
So here's your bill, and Fred Smith I actually told Fred Smith it's going to be $10,000, and Fred Smith was like, "Well, can I get an itemized receipt for that? That seems kind of crazy. You've been here for like 3 minutes." And he hands him over a handwritten invoice, and Fred Smith chuckles and goes up and pays him. And then later on, when he comes back down, people are like, "What was on the invoice?" And it was said that on the invoice was 2 sections. turning the screw $1, knowing what screw to turn, $9,999. And what we find in the mastermind is everybody comes in with the idea of like, this is exactly what I need. And I was, guilty of that too, and wasted probably a decade or more of my professional life just not wanting to hear what I needed to hear, but what I wanted to hear. And that's what the mastermind is. People come in saying, I want the marketing. And we realize like, hey, you don't have room to put people and you need to grow your practice. If I can't accommodate a new patient in your practice for 7 months, you're just pissing people off by advertising. Why spend 5, 10, 15 grand a month in marketing if you can't accommodate these people? Or your back hurts, so you don't really want just an associate to do the grunt work. You want an associate that does what you do, the FMRs. Or what's your long-term plan? I mean, the biggest one, like, people don't really think about what they really want. They just jump on this treadmill and they start running, and they wake up at 40, 45, or 50 and like, what the hell was I doing? Mm-hmm. I don't even know where I'm going.
Yeah. And then you're living with that pain of regret a little bit. And then it haunts you because now you don't have the time to kind of fix it, right? You didn't spend the time to think about the direction or the legacy or what you wanted to create. You just got it and started running. You're like, holy shit, where am I going? 20 years later,
well,
holy
listen,
shit,
when you first start your practice, you got bills and you want you need money, and you never re-examine it. You're just running down. It's like kind of like Forrest Gump. Next thing you know, you just been running. You don't even know where you're going. So yeah, I'm very proud of what we've been able to deliver in the mastermind. I'm proud of the people that have been in it, all the growth and development they've had. It's frankly probably one of the most valuable things that I do in my life is that. So that's awesome.
That's great. All right. So so check it out. Bulletproof Mastermind. Save the date, early August for the summit if you can bring your team. Good to connect, buddy. Great pod. We'll see everyone.
Thanks, bud. I want to chat with you offline. Lots to talk about, but thanks for listening, guys. Appreciate everybody here.